Hey guys, I figured I'd do a little intro here before we get into my guest interview. I am going to be speaking to our guest today, and I'm really hoping that you guys can watch this thing all the way through. I think this is a very pivotal video in the rookie card per se. We're going to get to know Eddie Healy, and then we're going to get into dissecting the 10 commandments of the rookie card through the lens of an attorney. And I'm asking that you stay through all the way to the end, because after the interview, I'm going to come back and kind of explain what this is going to look like going forward. You ready? Then let's do this. Edward, thank you. Welcome.
Victor, thanks for having me on. Glad to be here.
All right, no problem, man. You go by Edward, Eddie, Ed? What do you like to go by?
On the website or my business card it says Edward, but everybody knows me as Eddie.
Eddie's your hobby name. How about that? I have a really big pet peeve where when somebody calls me buddy or pal, it's like, okay, what's that about? But yeah, man, really grateful for you to be on the show. I know you contacted me via email back. I was looking at it yesterday, back in November of 2022, and you emailed me through my website, which is great to do. But I usually get like a lot of like solicitation for people who want to like redesign my website or offering their services, and I took a long time to answer you, and I apologize for that. But just going through the litany of emails that I was going through, it took me some time to get to you. And what I really was encouraged by you was that you were persistent. You kept dialogue open, even though I was delayed response, right? But you really were talking more along the document that I created, the 10 commandments of the rookie card. Now, I wanted to ask you, we're going to start with this question, but how did you come across the 10 commandments of the rookie card?
So I think it all probably would have started with Dr. Beckett's podcast. I think you've been on there multiple times. Okay. And so, yeah, your content is something that I've kind of gone back to time and again. And I think so. Obviously, I am also interested in and have collected rookie cards over the years, and that was a main reason why I connected with what you produce. And I think what I was in the I've been doing a long research project on what Lamar Jackson rookie card I wanted to focus on.
Okay.
And because I was thinking about different price points, and I probably spent almost a year deciding where I wanted to make a few purchases. And I watched your video, I think, on Select Football, I think it was 2021 Select, because I'm really interested in I've always been a big first card, and with the XRCs and Select. Especially when they're quite a different price point than other higher, like a National Treasures or Flawless, something like that.
Right.
So I was doing some research on Select and came across that, and then went to the website, and I think I heard you mention it before, the commandments, but then I think it was when I was going through that process, I saw on the website and checked it out, and I was like, oh, there's a document. And so once I got my hands on a document versus just a web page, I was like, oh, I can edit this. And so, I kind of, with my, background as an attorney and so I took a contract drafting class in law school. I just, started reading through and kind of carving it up, and I was like, I should send these ideas to you in case, you might find them helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, we're going to be going through the 10 commandments of the rookie card, and you're going to help us apply contract drafting skills. By no means, this isn't going to be a legal advice or a legal document. I typically state that constantly, that this isn't a legal document. It's just a list of thoughts, right? The principles, basically. But we'll go through that in a minute because I want to get to know you a little bit better, Eddie. Now, I know you had mentioned that you've been on, that I've been on Dr. Beckett's podcast, but I know that you have also been on Dr. Beckett's podcast, and I listened to a couple of episodes anyways, and I know that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but to my understanding, you came into the hobby through an inheritance that you received of sports cards. Is that correct?
I think definitely I came back in that way. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I think so growing up, my dad and I collected cards together. He more brought me into the hobby. I don't think he was really collecting per se when I was a kid, but he had his collection of cards from the 60s, 67 tops and 69 tops were, what I still have the binders of his collection of written on and glued up cards from that era. And, one of the things I also remember him having in a tub downstairs were what I've now learned are called rack packs. And he had 24 of them that were giveaways at an Orioles game. So I really never got the story from him. Where like if he was just going around the stadium that night and just collecting, packs that people like left behind, or if there was a lot left over, and he had worked at the stadium for some years in college. So I don't know if it was that way, but he was 16 in 1974. So, he doesn't have a lot of other cards from that era. It's not really, when you're 16 is not your typical collecting age, right? Like he was like 9 to 11 in 67, 68, 69. So like that makes sense for him having cards from them. But why he has those cards, those rack packs, kind of a mystery that I guess I'll never know. But really, it's kind of amazing that I still had them, in that we moved and sold some of the houses, the house I grew up in, where the cards were. And so we had been with my grandparents for a while there after I was graduated college. So after he passed and a few years went by, we were, you move things, you sell a house, and I knew I needed to go in and get them when we sold the house. And but then, I think, so I was around 2016, 2015 when we sold the house and moved. And I think between 2016 and 2020, I probably didn't touch or think of those cards once. And I never really thought about if there would be any value, but, and kind of coincided with, so my dad passed away when I was 24. And I realized later that I'm 33 now. I think between his passing in 2014 to 2020, I don't think I'd been in a card shop or had participated in the hobby at all. And the two are probably related. I don't think it was, the week my dad passed away, I probably didn't say to myself, I'm never going to, collect a card again or anything. But it was probably that age, and then him not being around, it probably just kind of was sort of a natural drift away. And then summer of 2020, I just sort of happened, I lost my job. We had budget cuts at the state agency I was at, and had some cleaning up to do in the house, and I had some more time to do projects like that. And one of the things I thought was like, let me just go through my dad's baseball cards. Haven't touched them in a while. Let me just, make sure everything's in order. Nothing's, no damage, no water damage or anything like that can happen, when you throw them in the attic. And I just pulled out the rack packs to make sure they're there. And, it was something my dad always said, like, don't throw them out and don't open them. So I just kind of just making sure they're there. But for some reason that day I was like, let me see if they're valuable in any way, just curious. Yeah. And I pulled it up on eBay, and I struggled to type what 1974. I could ascertain that from, the pack, but I didn't know how to, when I first typed it into eBay, I didn't know how to describe exactly what I had. And so that kind of started a journey of figuring out exactly what I had. And then once I realized that I had a pretty, a pretty good collection there.
Yeah.
Getting to the right auction house and deciding it was the, right time to,
Okay.
get rid of them.
Okay. And you said 1974 rack packs?
1974 rack packs. Yeah.
Wow. And there was, how many of them again?
There was 24,
Okay.
but we only put 23 to auction. I wanted to keep one just to kind of,
Okay.
have a memory of them. And even though the individual cards from my dad are more the things I remember touching and talking about, etc.
Yeah.
But, I was like, keep one. And one had like a little bit of a damage. Like the card was just a little bit bent. And just having that one was the only one that had an Oriole showing. So the one that has a Mike Cuellar card on top, I kept.
You kept that one.
Yeah.
Sentimental value on that one.
Right.
I get it. And what about today? What do you collect today or do?
Yeah. So it's interesting, that point where just realizing, I didn't really know what, was going on in the hobby for years. I had gone to the National in 2010 and 12 when it was in Baltimore, but understanding what the National is now and who's there and what sort of deals happen and the sort of, just the environment it is. I had no idea about that when I was in college going to that. It was like, hey, this cool thing me and my dad wanted to go to. That was at the convention center in Baltimore. But so now, I always collected things related to Baltimore. I'm an Orioles and Ravens fan. And so, and now, I think I definitely like collecting things from my dad's era. I made sure I got a Johnny Unitas rookie card, since 2020. It's something I wanted to do. Really, and then I also look for other smaller ways to connect to Baltimore, right? Like, I was thinking about Orioles and Ravens and Colts, Bullets. But they're, things I found that are fun little chases are, you've got T206, Honus Wagner, pretty cool card, right? I'll never run that.
Right.
But I didn't know that there were Baltimore Oriole cards in that set. So there's some, tobacco cards that, players have Baltimore written right across their chest in that same set. So there's some cards there. I went to Loyola College here in Baltimore, and there's a few players that have some cards. Lacrosse is another item that's big in Baltimore, and Topps has recently put out some sets, and it's been a hobby box of lacrosse. And there's been some older sets too that, being from Baltimore, you grow up with guys that become pro athletes in lacrosse. And so, there's guys either from my high school, that's another thing I like to collect, or guys I grew up with. There's actually some guys from my high school in different sports. There's vintage football, 51 Topps Magic, and Topps baseball. There's, I think, a couple in the 60s. But then, more recently, like Juan Dixon played basketball at my high school, Gary Neal. So there's some more modern cards. So really between my college, my high school, and then I think, rookie cards generally, what I used to collect was my dad was like, you always want to get the rookie card. And so growing up, I would always try to get the rookie card signed. So I think as I got older, that was like the one thing I kind of held on to, is like getting a rookie card and trying to get it signed. So I think now it's just, trying to, I think I sometimes, having learned different approaches to the hobby since 2020, I'll, look at certain purchases, maybe more investment type purchases, and then other ways, it's sort of just a way to reconnect with my dad, and in certain ways, just looking at cards that, were from his era. And I think a lot of what I do now is participating in the hobby, is just content. Being a lawyer, learning about an industry is really interesting. And I've just really enjoyed all the content, podcasts, YouTube, whatever, just to learn how the industry works and how it used to work. And so that I can, take that knowledge on. I've got a nephew now, and, hopefully I'll be able to have kids later on. And it's something that, I'm doing a lot of learning now, so that I can transfer that knowledge at some point to the next generation.
That's awesome. I love it. So from what I get, you come back to the hobby in 2020, and you're basically kind of like a Homer guy. You just like your Baltimore natives, that type of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty cool because I know a lot of collectors, myself included, where we wonder kind of what's going to happen with our collections once we pass. I know, I have 5 kids. None of them have gotten into sports cards, and I have 1 boy and 4 daughters, and none of them really even get into sports, to be honest with you. And I don't understand that. I really don't. But I sometimes wonder, what am I going to do? How am I going to divvy this up? How do I want this to look? And one thing that I would like really hope is that maybe someday as they get older, and maybe after I have passed, that they would, maybe one of them or somebody would like be inspired to become a collector of sports cards. So also I wanted to get into a little bit of your field of law. I know what field of law do you practice?
So do mainly employment law, do some sports law, and corporate law too. So, I would say right now I'm pretty early in my career still. And so I think the good part about that for me and the firm that I'm at, Wright Constable Skeen in Baltimore, is, we do pretty much anything on the civil side. We don't do criminal law, but and so we have a lot of different partners that have varied backgrounds, and so I get to work with almost all of them. And so right now I'm getting exposed to way more than the kinds of law that I just kind of said are my kind of focus is, like employment, sports, and corporate. But so really my day to day things change for me, and so it's really interesting for being an early career. And just really, the specialty is no specialty. The specialty is being a jack of all trades, I think, at times.
There you go. That's good. Yeah. And I don't know, is it a field that you were wanting? Is that the field that you were wanting, or just kind of something you settled into, or do you have aspirations to, like, ultimate dream job for you?
Yeah, I think, so definitely no, I did not plan on being a lawyer growing up. No lawyers in my family. And I would say that I kind of came to that decision. I worked in pro sports for a while. I worked for the Ravens as an intern for a few years out of college. And then I transitioned away from working in pro sports. Coming out of college, I thought I was going to be an NFL scout. That was my first internship with the Ravens.
Okay.
But I pivoted away after, just to be more accessible to my family a little bit. Because when you work in pro sports and you're entry level, you work a lot of hours. So I decided to pivot away from that.
That's honorable. Yeah.
Thank you. But I always had an interest in sports, and as I was away for a few years, I was coaching high school basketball and working in a special ed school here in Baltimore. And I was just, I was feeling like, as far as my day job, I kind of was feeling like I wasn't, reaching my full potential with what I was doing during the day. I loved coaching high school sports, but it's hard to get a job coaching if you're not, a teacher or in the building in some way. And so I think I was struggling with that decision. Was I going to be a teacher the rest of my life or what? And, I kind of just fell on the law degree. Like, that was probably going to be more difficulties for me, but I think, it would probably give me the best, raise my floor career-wise the most by getting a law degree. And so that's kind of how I wound up pursuing a law degree.
Wow. Awesome. I've always wondered, is there like a community of attorneys that, do you guys like get together during like a yearly conference or a Facebook group? How does that work?
Yeah, actually, there's a bunch of conferences, and depending upon the kind of firm you work at, whether it's going to things like that is more important. Because it's a form of marketing yourself and marketing your firm. And so for instance, I'm a member of the Sports Lawyers Association. They have an annual conference and I coordinate regional events for them in the Maryland, DC area. And yeah, I mean, I think, lawyers, there's a bar associations are actually sort of the oldest form of lawyers congregating. And so most cities and counties have a bar association, which lawyers are typically a part of. And there's certain committees sometimes that make recommendations on certain local rules or certain whatever in jurisdictions. And so that's the most common, I think, way.
Well, let's get right into it, shall we? We're going to look at the 10 commandments of the rookie card, and we're going to go through them one by one. And what I want to do, again, this is not legal advice. We are basically looking at the 10 commandments, and we're applying contract drafting skills. Okay. And we're going to use Eddie here to kind of help us with the language. I know, Eddie, what I have been doing, if I make any changes, I typically will make a date of that. And then I go to the website my website, and I open up this article, and I usually edit and I make the changes on that article to kind of record the changes that I have made on this document and why. And so I may or may not, I don't know, after our discussion here, I may go in and do an edit. So we'll see how it all plays out. Let's start with number 1.
And Victor, I want to say there's good concepts you have there. It's almost like legislative history there. When the legislatures in your states or whatever change bills or laws, that's exactly what they do. They keep the history, they date it, and they put why. And then if you ever need to go back and make a change or interpret something, that's what it's there for. So that's a good concept.
Cool. Mind you, I wanted to remind everybody here, and you too, Eddie. I don't know if you've known this or not, but typically the way I sell this is that the first 5 are what the Players Association brought into play in 2005. Now, the second set, which is 6 through 10, are basically longtime hobby standards that are time tested and still carry hobby weight today. And that's those. Now, there were more hobby type rules, but they've kind of grown obsolete. The ones I've got listed here are the ones that carry weight. So with that being said, we'll look at the first one. A rookie card must be licensed by both the league and the Players Association. Anything here you see that needs changing?
No, I think especially once you qualify that, this is really not necessarily your work, but what the Players Association have put out in the hobby is this is what for instance, Brooks Robinson's 1957 rookie card, I don't think was licensed by the Player Association.
Right.
But that's a rookie card, know. So yes, I think if that's what you do is copy and paste in the first 5 is what has been brought in, I think is 05 or whenever that was, then yes, it can stay. But I think, obviously it's cut. It's not exactly doesn't hold up throughout going backwards in history.
Right. Okay. And let me ask you this, Eddie, I don't know if you have seen any documents released by the Players Association or anything that, because this, I'm basically basing this off of articles that other people have written. Okay. So it's like a resource of a resource. I don't have, and I don't think the public has access to Players Association contracts. Am I right on that?
Yeah, no, I think different, and probably I would say not. If there is a document that has these sorts of things, I don't think so. But there are, if you go to the PA websites, usually the collective bargaining agreements are there, and there may be some other resources for the public, but I don't know that the document that outlines these rules probably is not. But the website's there, and that's something you can easily check to see what is available to the public there.
Is that something that the public can reach out to them and ask for, or is that that's not going to happen, dude?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. You can always, one of the things I was taught in negotiation classes, you don't get what you don't ask for. So
That's true.
Yeah. Will they give it to you? I don't know, but that's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I just assumed, since you said that, these are what, the Players Association came out with, that these were public somewhere, but I guess that's interesting that it's more of a resource of a resource.
Yeah. Basically, Mike Payne wrote an article in a Beckett magazine, October of 2005, issue number 247, and he was invited to attend that press release from the Players Association, and then he wrote up an article communicating the expectations, and so that's kind of where I'm pulling this information from. I have scoured the internet for more information on that press release or any type of contract that is public accessible, but I haven't been able to find anything. All right, let's move on to the second one. Commandment number 2, a rookie card can only be released after a player has made a pro level roster.
So this one, my question for you, and the thought that I had was, what is the definition of released? Is released when the set gets released, on distribution day, or is it when the card gets released? And my thought goes to, the select football XRCs that are redemptions. The player, again, this is just me making an argument. Since the player isn't known when the card goes out, you could argue that the card isn't released until after they're drafted.
Yeah.
And so, I just wonder if what's the definition of release day? Is it on distribution day, or is it when the card itself? Because when those two aren't the same thing. And you could compare that to a redemption card where it is known, this is a redemption for a Ken Griffey card, or this is a redemption for, let's use Adley Rutschman. We know Adley Rutschman's on the checklist, but for select QB4, we don't know who QB4 is going to be.
Right.
So I kind of pose that back to you. What is your hobby sense of, and I probably know what the intent is, but just, how does that question back to you? What is the definition of released? How does that?
Okay. And here's where, Eddie, where I struggle, because, this was basically was quoted from the Players Association. And even if you look it up in a dictionary, Wikipedia, Google, I don't care where you look up, when you look up the definition of rookie card, it basically is going to be, this is how rookie card is defined. Okay. But the problem that I have, and where I get really frustrated, is that card manufacturers will follow this most of the time, but not all the time. And there doesn't seem to be any repercussions or accountability for those type of, like, I call them miscues, right? Because they're doing kind of like what I've termed as a gimmick, and they're not following what the rules say, and it's kind of been widely accepted, and there's really nothing that anybody can do about it, unfortunately. But okay, yeah, I'll look into that. I'll consider that word released and see how I can it'll bring a little bit more clarity to that, right?
And I guess a question back for you, this is more of a question that I don't really know that I have the answer to. I think you're given these principles, right, in the first 5.
Right.
But I think, it's almost like you're just, I don't know that I would maybe accept them as gospel necessarily, as you're given them from the hobby, and then you, the hobbyist, is allowed to, massage them to make it really fit what the hobby believes. I mean, that's why I would look at those. And I guess to say I think it'd be okay if those don't really look like, how they showed up on day one, because if the hobby is defining what, those actually mean.
Oh, Eddie, don't get me started on that. I'm kidding. Let's go to the third one. A rookie card must be branded with some type of identifier on the card front. However, this is my commentary that I'm adding to this. However, just because it's branded with this identifier doesn't make it necessarily true. It must also meet the rest of criteria for a true RC designation.
This one, again, like number 3, it's like, again, there's no identifier on the 1957 Brooks Robinson, right? So I don't love it from that standpoint. But obviously, if it's we know this is a newer rule. I think the only thing is it's interesting, right? Because now they have all these brandings. Again, go back to the Lamar XRC. It's like, well, it's got a branding. So, I get to step 3. I'm still in the hunt for this thing, still passing the test, maybe, which is just kind of interesting that, like, it just says some type of identifier. It doesn't even say, because I think in some of your content before you talked about how the Players Association and the leagues, I think, are very particular about who and what gets the RC logo and when, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting that this doesn't say the RC identifier. It just says some identifier, so it's interesting that, you could be widening versus narrowing the pool on this one. But I mean, I don't think nothing necessarily really totally jumps out on this one, other than I think, again, there's no identifier on a 1957.
Right. Good point. And really, it's really the reason why, the PA got involved to begin with. It was we were putting, we were putting players in sets that were like way early, like Chipper Jones. It's a 1991 when he didn't even enter the league, until 1993. The same thing with Jeter, 1993 rookies, but he didn't enter the league until 1995. And so I don't know, it's just a lot of, what do you recommend here? As far as drafting, what would you recommend for this one?
And we're still number 3, right?
Right.
Yeah. The only thing as I'm scanning down, one of the things you see number 4, you see RC identifier, and number 6, we say CRC. I mean, I think, if some type is supposed to mean RC or RC identifier, it should all be standardized. If that's the intent, but if it's not the intent, it was that, the lazy drafting of someone at the PA, or someone of the resources we're saying,
right?
Because then that when there's 2 things that you intend to mean the same thing, but then they're not the same words, then that creates ambiguity. So I think that's something to consider, that if some type of identifier is supposed to mean only the RC identifier, should just say that.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's go to number 4. A non-pro roster player can appear on insert cards without the MLB RC logo.
So the thought that struck me a little bit for 4 and 5 is, what is the definition of non-pro roster?
Okay.
Because at least in baseball, you've got the 40-man roster. So the 25-man roster, or 26, I guess, you're definitely in the pros. But if you're on the 40-man roster, is that a non-pro roster or is that a pro roster?
Yeah.
I don't know. But
I guess that's a good question. I think it's opening day roster. right? If they're on the team roster, that's what constitutes it. As without that, you're a prospect. You're still in the minors per se.
Right.
And that's what I mean by non-pro roster. Should I be more clear with that term?
It's tough because you're not just running for baseball, right?
Right.
And that's what makes it tough, because I think, in football, you've got injured reserve, which I think football, there's really no minor leagues, right? Per se. So I guess everybody.
You can make a case for USFL, but
Sure. But no, there's no affiliated ball, right?
Right.
So, and I'm not as familiar with hockey's roster rules. And with basketball now, right? I mean, there is the G League, and those teams, a lot of those, or most of those, I believe, are affiliated. So, and who knows how G League cards could evolve over time. So, and that's probably that's a tough thing on you, I think, would say, with all the different rules and different roster constructions. And I guess another question with this rule isn't really something that is saying if you meet this, you are a rookie card. This is a non-rookie card, right? Non-pro roster can appear on an insert card without an RC identifier, which an insert card without the identifier we're saying is a non-rookie card. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then number 5 says a non-pro roster player can be included in the base set as a rookie card with the consent of the MLBPA, but an August 31st deadline still applies. This one was, from to my understanding, here's how it works. The PA meets with the card manufacturers before the season starts, and they discuss who's going to be, what cards they're going to create. Now, say, like Juan Soto come in later in the season, right? They had to get consent from the PA to make his cards because he wasn't on the original playing day roster. So long as it's they get consent to start including him mid-season, they do carry that right to them. Once they get the blessing, then they can produce cards of that player. But September call-ups, it's too late in the season for September call-ups.
Right.
So anything pop out at you with this one?
No, I don't think so. I think the other thing I just realized, it seems like 4 and 5 are really sort of tied together.
Okay.
One is without the RC identifier, and one is being included. I guess now I'm thinking about it. One's being included as a rookie card, but in 4 it's without a RC identifier. So I think 4 and 5 are supposed to be communicating opposites, right? One's with the identifier, and I think 4 is without the identifier, and I think 5 is trying to communicate with the identifier. But again, they don't really kind of mirror.
Okay, and I don't like that I got MLB specifically in 4 and 5, because then you're really isolating the other leagues.
Well, I would say, from what language were you saying that from, that it was baseball centric? Because I think there's Players Association for all 4, so that those 2 words I don't think would communicate just baseball.
Okay. Yeah. And when this press release was released, it was specifically towards baseball, but the assumption is that the principles per se kind of blanket all the other leagues as well. And for the most part, as far as the way they function, the way they manufacture cards, it does seem like they do fall in line with these rules most of the time. Not all the time, though. All right. Number 6, a rookie card. Now, these are Again, these are the ones that the hobby has established. A rookie card must appear in the base set. If a player has more than one card in the base set, the first appearance of that player shall be considered the rookie card.
I think that one's pretty clear. I think, and I really like 6 through 10 generally, just because these are the things that I sort of learned, 2020 to now, I think. So I kind of appreciate that. It's funny going to stores as kids, if it was in one of those top loaders that said rookie card on it in white,
Right.
I was just like, I guess it's rookie card. And I would know the guy's draft year. So I was like, okay, draft year, first card, like boom. But like this is, these sorts of things that, are very interesting that, I would have had no idea about, before 2020. So this rule, I think it's pretty clear, but it's interesting that it exists. These are the surprises for me.
And I'm really reconsidering this one in the aspect of, if a player has more than one, the first one that appeared is the rookie card. Now that's most of the time, but that's not all the time. Okay, let's take at 1988 football, Bo Jackson. Okay, his first card in that set is the inaction, and the actual rookie card is later on in the set. And so that's where I believe it should be more like whatever the hobby has gravitated to, right? Whatever the hobby preference should come into play there with that first appearance. So I've been chewing on this one for some time. A rookie card must appear in the base set. To me, that's like ground zero, man. That's like foundational right there. And that's the way most of us grew up. And so, yeah, great insight on that one. Let's go to number 7. A rookie card must come from a product that is allocated in pack form and distributed nationally when released. Regional sets may be desired by some collectors, but the industry doesn't include those because of the limited distribution. The overall principle here is all collectors should have a fair and equal chance at owning set cards.
So this one is pretty loaded for me.
Okay.
So there's something I just realized while I was prepping here earlier. So, and it's a shorter one. This is more of a question for you. We'll get to my more interesting ones. Pack form. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So is a box a pack?
Okay. I see where you're going there. Define box, right?
Well, yeah. So, and I don't mean on this, if you're distributing a hobby box, right? I mean, a pack within a box is obviously a pack, but I would, some of the packaging today, I don't know that I would call, and I can't, I don't think I've opened any myself that are just cards in a box, but I believe it's either, Treasures or Flawless or maybe even Panini One. But there's some I've seen open. It looks like there's no pack, right? It's just a really nice box. So the question is, and really the concept is the phrasing too specific here? Because if let's just say I have it right, and you can correct me. National Treasures there's no pack. It's just a box. Are we telling people that are buying National Treasures RPAs that?
Right. I see where you're going. I see your point. Yeah. No, that's the Beckett definition of that, right? But I mean, yeah, we didn't have RPAs, back in the day. So I see how that can complicate things.
And I think really I think the broader concept is by being specific there, it's too specific to the point where you're beholden to the packaging and distribution whims of companies. What was T206 was that
right
allocated a pack. I mean, I guess a cigarette pack now, or maybe that's a box, so it's flexibility in drafting is always, something to consider. So it's like, will that hold up over time?
Right.
So
Wow.
I don't know what the answer is there, but I just know that there's some really expensive cards that are coming out, I think just boxes. And, I don't know what, I know we talked about 1957 card, but Tito 6, same thing. It's like,
Right.
57 was in a pack, but was a Tito 6 in a pack?
So then the verbiage needs to be more like universal or broad.
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah.
That to make sense. Yeah. So, but that to me, I think is maybe less so of a mind-blowing issue than the word nationally.
Okay.
So my example I like here, and actually I want to ask about the distribution channels, because I know I'm looking at an older version, so you had some good language there. And I know Dr. Beck loves to talk about the distribution channels. And so my question to you in the hobby is, let's talk about a Shohei Ohtani card. He's got rookie cards into Japan, I think it's 2013. So Japan is a nation as far as I would be considered. And so if he's got cards, now again, you'd have to take the cards and run them up against the rest of these. And obviously, I guess, the league and the Players Association. Well, I don't know if there is a Players Association in the Japanese league. And if there is, then it would pass that test. But if not, then it sort of, gets kicked out on a technicality, we would say, right?
Right.
But, and there's more examples than this too, but Shohei just comes to mind. But,
Right.
I think this rule is intended to mean, it's distributed from California to Florida to Maine and the Midwest. But Japan is a nation. And so, I don't know that the hobby considers cards before the first, American card necessarily true rookies in like a Shohei example. But maybe there's other cards where that isn't the case. But I guess the question is, you have to ask yourself, and especially as the hobby grows, right? Things are going to be internationally distributed, or they are now, internationally distributed. So I guess the question is, what nation are we talking about? Or is nationally just sort of an inappropriate term now?
You make great points there. Where I'm coming from here with that specific subject is that these guidelines that have lived in Beckett, they're basically they cover North America and the North American sports card market. To my understanding, China, Japan, they have their own sports card market per se. And the two have never been really intertwined until we started getting into Shohei. Now it's waking up some collectors as to say, hey, wait a minute here. He's got legit stuff in 2013, and the same can be said about Ichiro, right? But really, it's all based on a North American market. And I don't know what they do in other nations. And I guess that's an avenue that I would really love to learn about. And so, great point. And that's been brought up to me so many times. I've gotten so many emails and so many DMs pertaining to Shohei's 2013 stuff, and so we'll see. I'm going to have to really consider this one. The markets have always been, separate. And I just feel like, man, we've got our own rookie card issues to deal with over here, let alone adopt someone else's mess over there, right?
Yeah.
From what I hear, and I don't know how true it is, but I am going to verify this. But like in those places, just like anybody can like print cards, and there's just a very broad scope of just stuff out there, and it's a discussion that I'll get into further in the future, but I'll definitely consider number 7. Now, you says that there's a lot packed in here, and a lot of that is commentary that I've added for clarity. Is that okay to do, or should I remove that kind of stuff?
No, I mean, I think, it's almost like commentary, right? Like there's a lot of in the legal world where there's rules, we have rules of civil procedure, rules of, other things. And there's comments to the rules. And sometimes there's 30 comments to one rule, one very short rule. So, yeah, I mean, there's different ways of presentation, right? But I think, they're more like footnoted,
Okay.
But, I don't think putting it right under in parentheses is a bad thing either. But I really like this. I think number 7, the distribution channels is something I think I've learned the most, because I would have never thought about that when looking at a card at a show or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and I think Dr. Beckett said it on a recent podcast about, unless, somebody tells you, you would never know. Like in the future, he's like, people aren't going to care about the distribution channels because they don't know how things were distributed. Right. And it's interesting, regional and that sort of thing. And I guess my one question is that concept maybe antiquated in the sense of that concept probably started pre-internet, right? Like understanding the rookie card based on, in part, distribution channels. Yeah, whereas now, even if it's, and I think it's primary distribution channels, right? So, but now there's so many secondary, and I think part of the intent, I think what I'm hearing is that everybody should have access to a rookie card. Mm-hmm. And so now with the internet, no matter, it feels like most people have a chance at a rookie card, even if it may not have been, nationally distributed these days, just because of the internet. That's it. And, that rule probably doesn't change, but I feel like it's an interesting, the whole distribution angle too. Cause I think another thing is it's fascinating because it's defining the rookie card based on something I think very far removed from the four corners of the card, which feels interesting.
Yeah. And I don't think, I think it's okay to have, all right, he's got a 2013 Japanese rookie card, 100%. I'm not disputing that. But in the US with the MLB, he's in 2018. So I don't, so then we're saying now a player can have 2 rookie cards, right?
But well, you could convince me that the one rookie card is 2013 for Shohei.
Right, right.
That might ruffle some feathers, but I mean, but yeah, and actually I have a question related to that at the end I want to ask you, before we sign off, but we'll come back to it.
Okay. Let's go to number 8. A player's rookie card that is part of an update traded set and was distributed in pack form nationally must not have any other cards issued within that same product line.
I think that one's pretty good. I don't really note anything major there. I think, again, that is similar to 6 and 7, where it was like, wow, I never thought of this. As far as, the extended sets, updated, traded, those sorts of things. I think that one is, I think it's well defined by the hobby that I've, come to learn in the last few years.
That's you're a Baltimore guy, like Cal Ripken's 82. He's in 1982 Topps. He's got a card with 2 other players. That one is considered the rookie card because it was the first card that came out, right? Mm-hmm. But then we have the traded set where he was included in that one. And everybody likes that one because he's by himself and it's more eye-pleasing. But that one has never carried a rookie card identifier because it didn't fall in line with the guidelines, right? And that's kind of where today, if we were to look at it today, we have rookie debut cards versus the base set card, right? And the rookie debuts, you look at those, they're really not, even today, they're not really, I mean, I don't want to say that they're not accepted, but they're not desired as much as the regular base set rookie, right?
Yeah.
All right. Number 9. Cards from licensed or unlicensed manufacturers depicting players in minor league uniforms shall not be considered an RC. Neither are cards sponsored by a product such as Post, Coca-Cola, Hostess.
Now, this one is interesting. And I think this one to me feels like something that has the potential to get contracted because I feel like could be some redundancy to it.
Okay.
And the first thought is, if a rookie card under number 1 must be licensed by the Players Association, I think the intent behind this rule is, correct me if I'm wrong, is like stadium issue, minor league ballpark, minor league team sets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now maybe some of those are, but I don't believe, at least in history, the minor league players have not been a part of the Players Association. Right? So I don't know how the Players Association would have ever, licensed minor league stadium sets. Now, I haven't looked on the back of every one of those of all time, but is there, to me, some redundancy there that you may not need number 9. And then the other one would be number 2. A rookie card can only be released after a player has made a pro level roster.
Gotcha.
And it's, well, if he's on a minor league team set, minor league stadium card, it seems like he cannot be on a pro level roster. So, but the other thoughts were, and I know you've got some, like you added Coca-Cola, Hostess, right?
Food and beverage issues, yeah.
Yeah, and I think thought is you could add something like maybe, because I think those minor league sets are often maybe they're giveaways, maybe they're not, maybe they're just in the team stores, but something like a stadium only. The term stadium only, whether it's stadium only release, because that might encapsulate giveaways or for sale, but maybe something related to stadium only releases that might be helpful to defining what your intent was behind that rule.
Man, and I it's so cool because I never thought of that until you brought it up, but I do see some redundancy here. I mean, really the number 2 and number 1 really makes this kind of needless to say because it doesn't fall in line with number 1 and 2. So, okay, that's cool. And let's look at the last one here. A rookie card must not be an insert, redemption, a parallel card, which I have removed parallel card. I have changed this document to include parallel cards, nor an on-demand product.
Yeah, and I think this one is very hobby specific, and that's a good thing, right? I mean, this is more like, it's almost like it's not your definition per se. It's what people are telling you the definition is, which is kind of interesting, cool rule. I think the only one that I ever, to me, and I think again, because I was trying to maybe backdoor something into being a rookie card, is redemption cards. I find it interesting that, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, redemption cards maybe 10, 20 years ago might have been less common or thought of differently than today,
Right.
And such has a different connotation. Whereas, if something, I'm trying to think of popular redemptions now, but, obviously there's the XRCs, which they're not in it. But if a player, can the fact that a player didn't return all of his signatures to the manufacturer in time that made his card go from in the set to being a redemption, is that now not a rookie card because, well, it just happened to be a redemption, but it wasn't, that redemption might be different than the redemption, long ago.
The gray area in the redemption cards has always been number 1, the year that it was printed, and number 2, the actual year that they end up getting distributed. Okay, redemption cards are really hated in the hobby today, and they really were hated even back in the early 90s when they first came out. For example, you have with like Shaquille O'Neal, he had some redemptions because he was under exclusive contract with Classic. Well, they released some redemptions that you had to mail in, And by the time you got them back, it was the following year, and they were printed like they weren't printed in 92, 93. They were printed in 93, 94. So it's like, okay. And there's just always been issue with redemption cards. They've never really been accepted as a form of rookie card distribution. And from what I'm hearing, word is out that Topps and Fanatics, they're just going to absolutely get rid of redemptions altogether after they take over here. So yeah, that's an interesting play there. It's always been a redemption card, man. I feel like putting like a little asterisk, right? Or as Dr. Beckett would say, RC question mark, because it's debatable, and I get it because they're beautiful cards typically. But yeah, okay. Let me bring us back here.
And I've got one question for you, Victor, before, and this is more of an existential question I just thought of today.
Okay.
Going through these rules, you obviously would knock out or eliminate a card from being a rookie card, right? That's sort of one of the purposes, right?
Yeah.
So my question would be, does every player who has a card have a rookie card?
Man, that's a tough one. I would, I hate to take the cheap route and go, I believe so.
Well, I guess it's interesting, right? Because you would assume if you've got a card, one of them's the rookie. But I think sometimes, like you said, the first card and a rookie card are not necessarily the same thing. But if you have only one card and you go through these 10, you might not hit all 10.
Right.
Then means you don't have a rookie card, but you have a card, which to me almost doesn't make sense. So I was just curious if you had an answer for that, or if you hadn't thought about it like that. I was just curious that like you could not have a rookie card, but have cards.
Yeah, I think it's a form of how close does it come to lining up with the guidelines. So not every single card is going to line up perfectly with all 10 of them. But because of the era that it might have been printed in, maybe only 6 of the 10 really apply, and it's suffice for that specific card. But it's especially when we're talking new guidelines and old guidelines, there is a stark divide there when we're talking different eras, right? But yeah, man, I really appreciate our time here. Edward, you have been truly a blessing with this, because I love, you even brought it up in a lot of your emails. You were shooting little nuggets at me. You really made me think, and you really made me, okay, do I really need to take a look at these 10 commandments, and is there any way that we can improve it, right? And that's, I think, is the logical step in that I would like to do. And really, I don't want to say that I'm going to change it, but I'm going to take steps to make it better. And I need people like yourself in my corner, offering up, your thoughts and opinions on it, based on your drafting knowledge. And so I really appreciate that, man. Anything else you want to share?
No, yeah, I just say I appreciate it too. I mean, I appreciate the response back, and I like talking rookie cards, and I've definitely learned a lot from a lot of your content. I mean, just like we were saying, the distribution channels, the extended sets, all those sorts of things. I think when it comes to pre-2020, I don't think I really had any understanding of any of those concepts, and so I think definitely appreciate yourself and other content creators for just putting your compilation of hobby knowledge out there together for other people to look at, learn, and think for themselves if this makes sense to them or not.
All right, Eddie. Well, thank you so much for joining us. If is there anywhere that we can reach out to you on social media?
Sure. Yeah. I think Twitter is probably a great place to connect. So I'm at ELH_IV. I'm the fourth, so Edward L. Healy the fourth, ELH_IV. And then I'll give you my email to put in the show notes too.
Fabulous. I will do that. All right, folks. Well, that's going to be it for this episode. I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate our guest, Eddie Healy. Until next time, we'll catch you on the next one.
Hey, okay, guys. So my mind right now is just blown because I'm really, really excited about the things that Eddie shared with me, getting to talk with him a little bit on the side even. He's really inspired me to now take this thing to the next level. Now, I've written that first document, and it's basically, right, the new rules and the old rules. But I think what I want to do now is write a new draft for the 10 Commandments of the rookie card. And I want it to be more universal, right? More broad in the sense of language, that the language will apply to perhaps all sports, and the language will intertwine all eras. And so that's going to be my game plan going forward. So stay tuned with it. It'll probably take me some time to draft this up, and I'll shoot it over to Eddie, and he can give me some editing on it. But I do plan on writing up a new draft and intertwining the old and the new to kind of establish a new resource, I guess you can call it, and defining this rookie card for us a little bit better. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. I would love some feedback, any ideas, or if you just want to shoot me a word of encouragement to do it and go for it, or you can shoot it down if you'd like to. I would just love to know the pulse of the hobby on something like this. Thanks again, guys. I'll talk to you later.